So welcome today to our Understanding the Impact of the Menopause at Work webinar that is being facilitated by HR Recruit and Ali Grady. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Ali, who will introduce herself shortly. Ali is going to explore the business case for supporting menstruation and menopause at work and the steps you can take to foster open conversations to create a supportive environment where individuals and businesses can thrive. If you've got any questions during the session, then please put them in the chat box facility. We'll try and cover them as we go through, otherwise we'll cover them at the end. I'm now going to hand you over to Ali, who will introduce herself and start the event. Thank you.
Hello everyone, lovely to be here, and thanks to Jo for inviting me back again today for this session about understanding the impact of menstruation and menopause at work. I know it's been a popular session, so as Jo has said, I'm Ali Grady. I'm co-founder and director of the Thrive team. We're a talent acquisition and people development company. So my background is in HR. I've worked for large organisations like Boots the Chemist, the NHS and the BBC. And I've long had an interest in mental health in the workplace. I'm a mental health first aid instructor. And more recently, sort of certainly in the last 5 years or so, I've taken a real interest in the impact of sort of menopause in the workplace. And as most people, when they become interested in something, then it is often through a personal situation. So I developed my interest in menopause in the workplace really due to my own experience and lack of conversations that were being had. So being sort of getting quite into some personal stuff, I had a hysterectomy at 42. That was 15 years ago now. I had a condition called endometriosis, which I had lived with for pretty much all of my adult years, and that had resulted in me having a hysterectomy. So I was immediately put onto HRT and immediately went into menopause. I ticked along for a number of years, feeling okay, and then I ran out of HRT and I had been on HRT probably about 10 years at this point, and thought, well, I'm going to give it a go without HRT, but I quickly realized that I needed to go back. So anyway, I'll get into a bit more of that. So important to say, I'm not medically trained. This is going to be an interactive session. I'm going to be asking some questions. Love for you to contribute in the chat if you feel comfortable to do that. And I think, as Jo said, this session will be recorded. I've already sent a copy of the slides to Jo, so they'll be available to you afterwards. And I'll also be sharing some free resources with you at the end of the session. So, and those there really to help you become a supportive employer for those experiencing menstrual health conditions and transitioning menopause. So I guess the first question I want to ask is, what one word comes to mind when you think about either menstrual health or menopause in the work? If you're happy to do so, maybe just drop your thoughts into the chat. What's one word that you think of when you think about menstrual health or menopause when in the workplace? Thanks, Lindsay. Overwhelm, anxiety. Yeah, taboo, absolutely. Yeah, brain fog. We've got some of the symptoms coming through. Ignore, confusing, hiding exhaustion, misunderstood. Yeah, flushes, humiliating. Yeah, feeling dismissed. Yeah. Yeah, we've got some themes coming through here. It's a woman thing. That's an interesting point, Wendy. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. Yeah, it's not my problem. Yes, it's frustrating. Yeah, hiding how we actually feel. Yes, and certainly that was sort of my experience, particularly sort of for many years dealing with the symptoms around endometriosis and then also around sort of menopause. Yeah, so thank you everyone for sharing. And I guess I think it is fair to say that certainly the topic of menopause has been talked about or is being talked about in the workplace a lot more now. And I think that's largely due to some of those very public personas, Davina McCall being one who are talking about it so openly, and there have been documentaries made as well. But I think in terms of menstrual health, perhaps we're not talking about that so much, but I think that is again coming onto the workplace agenda. So let me just share with you very briefly what we're going to cover off today. We've got 45 minutes, so it's going to be a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully you're going to go away with something that is helpful to you. So we're going to touch on some of those common conditions that affect menstruation. We're going to explore menopause a little bit more around those stages, the common symptoms and treatments. And as Joe's already mentioned, we're going to be sort of having a look at a bit of the business case around these two important topics. And hopefully you're going to go away with some more thoughts, certainly, but also some resources and some tips to help you create a menstruation and menopause friendly workplace. So what do I mean when I talk about menopause? Oh, just a little aside. I may well talk about women throughout this session, but it's important to note that when I do say that, I'm referring to anyone who has periods or who's going through menopause transition. So what do we mean when we talk about menopause? Well, we're going to explore these sort of four stages. We're going to start off with the pre-menopause stage, and we're going to just touch on some of the myths and facts around sort of menstrual health conditions, really. And then we're going to sort of very quickly work through the other three stages of menopause. But perhaps an image like the one you're seeing on screen isn't so unusual to you. You probably recognize this. I'm definitely no biologist, but I think we all recognize that in that pre-menopause stage, those are the years where a woman is having her regular, if you have a regular cycle, it's generally prime childbearing years, and there are no noticeable signs of menopause. On average, people who menstruate may spend well over 30 years in this period of time, and a typical sort of menstrual cycle can last between 23 and 38 days, or if you're like me, there was no regular or rhyme or reason to it. Okay, so we're going to park menopause now, and we're going to start to just touch on a little bit around menstrual health. And I'm going to show you some statements, and I'd like you to say in the chat whether you think the statement is myth or fact. So the first one is severe period pain usually starts later in adulthood. What do you think? Myth or fact? Yeah, or false if that helps for you. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think everyone is staying myth. Absolutely. Yes. So what we're talking about here, when we talk about severe period pain, we're talking about a condition called dysmenorrhea. And that really describes menstrual pain that is so severe that it can interfere with your daily life. Often begins around the ages of 12 to 14, and the pain can be so strong that, as I said, it really can impact your day-to-day living. Typically, that pain will start maybe a few hours before menstruation and can, last for, definitely a few hours and possibly a few days. Obviously, as we're going to probably say a few times throughout this session, everyone is different. Okay, I've already mentioned endometriosis, and I appreciate people may not know what that is, but endometriosis and adenomyosis are rare conditions. What do you think about that? Again, yeah, myth or fact, true or false? Yeah, again, I think everyone is saying myth. Okay, so endometriosis, and I've mentioned it, but that is where tissue, similar to the lining of the womb, grows outside, causing pain and other symptoms, such as fatigue, digestive problems, difficulty concentrating, bowel, bladder issues, painful sex, bloating. It can cause infertility, and it affects 1 in 10 people. The average time for diagnosis in the UK is between 8 and 10 years, depending on where you live. Endometriosis can only be diagnosed through a surgical procedure, through a laparoscopy. And I can get really angry when I think about that around endometriosis, because I was first diagnosed about 35 years ago, and the diagnosis times was exactly the same then. So, we haven't moved on in terms of awareness around this and diagnosis. A survey that was completed by the Endometriosis Association reported that 51% of women with endometriosis reported that their symptoms had affected their ability to work, and 42% reported missing work because of their symptoms. And if we think about adenomyosis, that's around 20 to 35% of women affected. And that's where the lining of the womb starts growing into the muscle of the womb, which causes painful, heavy periods, pelvic pain, bloating, pain during sex, and is more commonly diagnosed in women over 30, but it can affect anyone who has periods. And then myth. So final statement then, only a few women experience PMS. So when we talk about PMS, we're talking about premenstrual syndrome. Yeah, you're all very well educated people on here today. Everyone's saying myth. So yeah, that is indeed a myth. It's around 30% of women experience PMS. Some of those symptoms include mood changes, anxiety, irritability, tiredness, headaches, disrupted sleep, and all of that can affect our performance at work. You might have heard of PMDD as well, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which affects between 5 and 8% of women. And it's really more severe symptoms of PMS, and includes low mood, and for many women with PMDD as well, suicidal thoughts. So, really, we should absolutely be taking all of these conditions seriously. There are, of course, other conditions, but in the interest of time, we won't be exploring those. But I think it's important to remember, as I've already said, that symptoms will vary for every individual. And really, when you hear some of the symptoms that I've mentioned, it's not hard to understand why it can really impact people at work, their ability to be at work, but once they're at work, also their ability to, carry out their work effectively. So it's going to be affecting productivity. Okay. Going to move on now to think about the 3 stages of menopause. And the first is around perimenopause. So if you think back to the previous slide I showed, that's where the sort of the hormones start to fluctuate. So perimenopause is really the first stage of that transition into menopause, and where the levels of reproductive hormones start to change and a woman's cycle can become irregular. Symptoms of so you're still experiencing symptoms of menopause, but your periods haven't stopped, and perimenopause will end when you haven't had a period for 12 months. And when you haven't had a period for 12 months, you are sort of known to be have reached the menopause. And so this is the second stage, where the woman's body stops producing hormones that cause ovulation and menstrual periods. Menopause usually affects women around about the ages of 45 to 55, but the average age is 51, although women of colour can go through menopause earlier, in their late 40s, with factors such as stress, sort of race discrimination affecting that, and perhaps forcing them into an earlier transition. So this point about menopause being 12 months after your last period is really important because you might not have a period for 11 months and then you have a period and the clock starts ticking again, unfortunately. So you don't know that you've actually reached the menopause until that 12-month point. So it's really important that women start or continue to use contraception during that period of time. Menopause can happen naturally or for reasons like surgery, perhaps have ovaries removed or to have a hysterectomy. Cancer treatments like chemotherapy can also bring on menopause, and like and some people can experience premature menopause as well, which is when the menopause happens before the age of 40. That affects around 1 to 3% of women, and it, so that might be caused by premature ovarian insufficiency or premature ovarian failure. And then we reach the post-menopause stage, which is, as I said, that sort of 12 months after your last period. And but that's not to say you don't still have some symptoms of menopause as well. And depending on what age you transition through the menopause and depending on what age you live to, you could spend a significant amount of time, maybe 30 to 50 years in that post-menopause stage. So it's important to remember every person's experience of menopause will be different and unique. There aren't really any set age limits or time periods to transition through the menopause. And so in sort of recognizing everybody's differences, I think that's really important for the workplace. So let's think about who the menopause affects. So we know it affects women. Drop into the chat who else you might think is affected by menopause. Poor partner, yes. Partners, families. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Children as well. Yeah, absolutely. Colleagues mentioned. Yes. Everyone around us. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Depending on whether you sail through menopause or whether you know you really struggle, the chances are other people are going to know about it. Yeah, Kim, even your dog knows about it. Yeah, that sounds sort of very typical. So we've talked about women, but it's also important to remember that people who are transgender, whose gender is different from the sex they were assigned at birth, so people transitioning to male would potentially still go through menopause. Intersex people, people who have differences in sex development, who don't conform to the typical definitions of male or female bodies, people whose gender is neither male nor female and who identify as non-binary, and people who have physical disabilities may experience additional challenges whilst going through the menopause. People who are neurodiverse may experience new challenges in or feel that sort of current challenges are exacerbated, relating perhaps to sensory sensitivities, executive functioning, and emotional regulation as well. Jenny, will I be commenting further on links between ADHD and menopause? I won't, I'm afraid. One, I'm going to be honest, it's not my area of expertise, and also in the interest of time. But if you wanted to get in touch with me afterwards, then I can absolutely have a chat about that if that would be helpful. So in terms of indirectly, I think we said a lot of this in the chat. Absolutely, family, friends, partners, managers, team members, and colleagues, and so ultimately the whole organisation. So whether you're experiencing the menopause yourself, chances are you will be coming into contact with somebody on a very regular basis who is, whether that's at home, family, friends, or in the workplace. So it's important to be aware. And I think it's sort of, I'm picking up from the chat that obviously there's a lot of women on the session today, and perhaps with a lot of first-hand knowledge. And I don't know about you, but for me, I guess what I knew about the menopause before I actually went through it was uh, hot flushes. It wasn't talked about when I was younger. It certainly wasn't something my mum was comfortable to talk to me about. So it was always sort of very whispered, and the information just wasn't around. We've got a lot more awareness now, but I didn't think I had any idea what symptoms were coming my way, and they can kind of hit you like a steam train. So I'm guessing that the slide that you're seeing now is probably quite familiar with you. I think we are more aware of the wide range of symptoms that there are. None of them pleasant. Just pick, if we pick any of those on there, they're not pleasant. And we're talking about people being in perimenopause stage or transitioning through the menopause for years. I was forced into menopause due to a hysterectomy. And, my symptoms were manageable for probably 10 years post hysterectomy. My symptoms have really exacerbated in the last 5 years. Perhaps at the time I would naturally be going through menopause. When I spoke to my menopause consultant about that, I said, "Why is that?" She said, "We just don't know. We just don't have the research on it." So, hate to tell you, if you think it'll go very quickly, it probably won't. Although, as I say, I'm not medically qualified to tell to sort of make any of those assessments. So let's think about some of those symptoms in the workplace. Let's just take some perhaps of those more familiar hot flushes, those sudden sort of increase in temperatures. Thinking about the workplace, if you wear a uniform, how does that uniform help or support a woman who might be experiencing either hot flushes or chills? Are employees able to regulate their own workplace temperature? I know a lot of people are working sort of hybrid or still perhaps working from home. Perhaps there's greater control, but if people are coming into offices or workplaces, how are you supporting? We think about disrupted night sleep. I think there's very few people that sleep well these days, whether you're going through menopause or not. But how does that impact in your sort of safety culture? If you work in a safety critical environment, how does that impact individuals driving to work, driving for work, driving home from work, and their productivity? So these are all things that kind of need to be aware of and be thinking, what's the impact in the workplace? Let's have a look at some less common menopause symptoms. And again, I can probably say I've had all of these as well. In fact, one of the early signs for me, and this was before I had my hysterectomy, but I'd had an ovarectomy before that, so I'd had one of my ovaries removed. I had this burning sort of sensation in my tongue, and I Googled what it was because I hadn't burnt my tongue, and it was an early sign of hormonal changes. The other thing that sort of really sort of plagues me a lot is itchy ears, not on the outside of your ears, but sort of inside. And I certainly know about driving anxiety as well. I've had some support with that, and I know that that's quite common. And then if we think about sort of that lower part of the body, restless legs, pins and needles, cold hands and feet, changes to body odor. Again, nothing overly pleasant. But I guess again for the workplace, the more you educate your employees, perhaps somebody doesn't recognise that they are transitioning menopause, and with that awareness means that might prompt them to seek some support, perhaps through their GP, perhaps to check out that actually none of those things aren't another medical condition as well that they might need to be supported with. Yeah, thanks, Paula. And my understanding is it's high histamine. So what I've been advised to do is to use something like Piriton. You can spray it onto a cotton bud, just put it in your ears, and that certainly helped me. So common menopause treatments. So these treatments are taken from the from NICE, which is the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. That's the guidelines that will be very well sort of or should be well known by GPs. HRT, and important to say, I chose to take HRT. It certainly helped me. It's not for everyone, and obviously, it has to be prescribed through consultation. But it it's there to help balance out hormones and can ease some of those symptoms. And I certainly know when I stopped taking it for a while that the symptoms came back with a vengeance. There was quite a bit of bad press about HRT many years ago, linked to cancer. I think that research has now been discarded, and for many women, it is safe, but of course, that is under consultation. Talking therapies such as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which can address mood changes and emotional well-being, offering support through menopausal transitions. And that can help an individual perhaps think through, if you are having a hot flush, you feel really embarrassed about it, you think everyone can notice, CBT can perhaps reframe some of that thinking that an individual might experience. And then perhaps the things that many of us can do for ourselves is think about the lifestyle that we lead. So, thinking about reducing things like caffeine. Anxiety can be a symptom of menopause. If you're feeling highly anxious and you're drinking lots of coffee, perhaps the coffee or caffeine is impacting that. Relaxation, anything you can do to improve your sleep, yoga, exercise, anything that is sort of improving your body, I guess, and reducing alcohol. Yeah, Helen, you've just said that, and again, that's something I've certainly had to look at. I just don't enjoy alcohol in the way that I used to anymore, because it's certainly not worth the after effects. So there's lots that people can do to support their transition through menopause. Some of it you would need to obviously discuss with GP, but there's stuff that we can do for ourselves, and it's all about trial and error and finding out what works for you. So let's think about menopause and employment, and I'm going to show you some numbers, and I'm going to ask you to drop into the chat what you think it might relate to. So the first number is 50. How do you think that relates to menopause and the workplace? What could that be? Average age it starts. Actually, a little bit later. Average age woman goes through it. Slightly different. It is about age, but it's women over 50 are the fastest growing demographic in the workplace. So women age 50 to 64 are the fastest growing demographic in the workforce. So and because we've talked about the age range where people go through menopause, most people going through the menopause will be at work. And I think, if we go back probably 30 years, the workplace was very different. Women would have retired, would have stopped work when they had children, etc. So those experiencing menopausal symptoms can be forced to take long-term absence for an average of 32 weeks throughout their career. And that's a statistic from the CIPD, a guide to managing menopause at work. So the next number is 67. What is 67? How does that relate to retirement age? Yeah, Kim, it is retirement age. So, women are at work when they are transitioning through to menopause, and as I've already said, the your time in sort of post-menopause could be 30 to 50 years. So again, this all points to the fact that this is a workplace issue. 51, we talked about that already. That's the average age that a woman will transition through to menopause. And 80, what do we think this is? 80. It's probably the new retirement age, but any thoughts about what 80 could be? Average age to live to? Not quite how I feel. Yeah, I'm with you with that, Holly. Times a day, I lost a word. Brilliant. Um, uh, so almost 80% of menopausal women are in employment. So about 25% of people going through menopause consider leaving their job because they find it difficult to deal with their symptoms. Many, in fact, do leave their jobs or reduce their hours. And I think important to highlight here, actually, that's going to have a significant financial impact on the individual, their family as well. So again, employers should be thinking about can you support people to say in employment, if somebody comes to you sort of and says, I don't think I can cope. I'm really struggling to do my job. I want to reduce my hours. I want to retire. Then, how are you supporting them to have made the right decision for them? We do have a sort of moral sense of duty here as well. Let's think about the workplace impact then. You won't need me to tell you all of this stuff, but in a survey of more than 2,000 women by the CIPD, 69% said they had a negative experience at work because of their menstrual symptoms. More than half said that they had to miss work because of their period symptoms, with 1 in 5 taking sick leave. 3/5 said they had worked when they didn't feel well enough to. 45% never tell their manager their sick leave is related to menstruation. Perhaps none of those statistics surprising there. But all of that is going to be having an impact, whether you're aware of it or not, on your absence, your costs, your recruitment. If people are leaving, if you're not able to retain skills, that's going to have an impact on your business. And, hiring and sort of retraining costs are around £30,000 per individual. So, there's a real financial imperative here to think about how can you support people in your organisation. So just perhaps drop into the chat. What do you offer in your organisation that supports menstrual health and menopause? If you're happy to share, just a few thoughts. What do you already offer? Maybe it's nothing, and that's okay too. Flexible working arrangements, great. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, menopause support group. Yeah, okay. Free period products, desktop fans, but not much else. An understanding manager, and that is absolutely crucial, isn't it, Lindsay? For so many reasons. I know a number of people in the chat previously said that they felt ignored, not listened to, not seen. If you've got an understanding manager, then that's brilliant. Okay, lovely. So we've got a variety of options coming through, and that's great because you're already on the way to perhaps fulfilling your legal obligations, which will come on to. But things like can't get my words out, sorry. Flexible working arrangements, access to cool and quiet places, uniform or environmental adaptations, manager training and awareness, so important. Perhaps peer support or champion networks. And I think also perhaps supporting women who might be going through a significant loss of confidence, really sort of feeling that their world is changing and not knowing where they fit in. But perhaps things like those menopause support groups that you've mentioned, where people can talk to others that might be experiencing, but also perhaps there's something around training or coaching that you could do as an organisation as well. So if you are offering something, then you're already on your way to fulfilling your obligations of what will be outlined in the Employment Rights Bill. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Just Thanks, Marianne. Yeah, changing changing shop floor workers' trousers from white to blue for obvious reasons there. And just, it helps with confidence, doesn't it? Women are not so worried. Okay, so just talk to you about what we know about the Employment Rights Bill. And it's at its finest stages now, going through Parliament. It's on the last sort of amendment. So, it could be finalised this month. I think that was the expectation. If not, hopefully by the end of this year, and it will be good to get some real clarity there. So there's going to be a legal obligation for employers to address menopause in the workplace, especially if you employ over 250 people. And part of the Employment Rights Bill, we're expected to have menopause action plans that will be developed and published as part of equality action plans. Those action plans are expected to be evidence-based, so organisations, employers able to outline how they actually support women in practice or people going through menopause in practice. It will be voluntary from April 2026 and likely to be mandatory from 2027. So what does that mean in terms of evidence base, and what support would you be providing? A lot of what you've already said in the chat will be going towards that evidence support. So flexible working hours, that modification of the workplace environment, and having clear policies and staff training, so vital. So what could you be doing now? I think the bill is about to be published essentially any day. Well, I think it's about starting proactively. So although we're still waiting for the final wording, we know that we're going to likely to have to provide evidence. So I would say start gathering that evidence now. If you've got policies and procedures in place, that's great. If you've done some training with all staff members, that's brilliant. If you've done training with managers, that's fantastic. And if you haven't done that yet, then that's probably your place to start, really. If you're thinking about the workplace environment and how adaptations can be made, if you already have a number of reasonable adjustments that have been put in place for either individuals or groups, then that's good as well. And really starting to make sure you've got that documentation so you can be compliant and have it to hand when you have to make it available. So for smaller employers, for under 250 people, they're not going to be required to publish plans as we understand it, and there will be government guidance on how they can adapt workplaces and offer menopause support. So just a quick question for you, and just drop into the chat. How ready do you feel your organisation is for the menopause-related requirements in the Employment Rights Bill? Do you feel ready? Do you feel somewhat ready, or not at all? Okay. So a real mixture there. Most people coming through with a somewhat, and I guess if you feel you're somewhat, then what more could you be doing? Um, so perhaps have a think about that. More ready than not. That's brilliant, Lindsay. Okay. Some people mentioned that they have a policy. Um, and really, it's a good idea to have a policy. It's not a legal requirement, but I think it can be a real helpful marker for you as an employer. It sends out signals to your employees that actually you take this matter very seriously. And it's often an easy to refer to, easy to access, or they should be, document that people can see actually what does it mean for me in the workplace, and very importantly, whose responsibility is it to help me with this. It should include risk assessment information and any tips or support or resources that you can point your employees to. So if you don't have a policy at the moment, as I've said, there's no legal requirement to. Perhaps you mention menopause or menstrual health in other policies that you have, and that's fine too. Um, so if you haven't got one, maybe worth thinking about. Kim asking where you can find a draft policy. I can probably send one to Joe after the session. So there are plenty about. So they're not hard to find, but I can send you one. And important to note, I think that in 2022, a poll of 86 respondents said they were more likely to work for a company that provided menstrual health, menopause, and pregnancy related support. It helps put everybody on the same page. It creates transparency and makes it much easier to talk openly to other people. Okay. I'm conscious of time. I've just seen we've got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to have to really rush. Um, some more information here for you. Thinking about the business case. So we've got the demographic case. 72% of women who menstruate are in work, women over 50, fastest growing demographic. We've got the business case about that loss of productivity and the cost of presenteeism, let alone absence. And we've got the legal case. The menopause and menstrual health in themselves are not sort of considered disabilities, but if you experience symptoms severely enough, it could be classed as a disability. And what we've seen is tribunal claims rising significantly over the last few years. And then, of course, we've got the social responsibility case. Only 3% of women believe their employer is doing enough to support them with their menstruation, and 1 in 10 women leave work due to menopause. And that has that sort of knock-on costs around attraction, retention, keeping those skills, and retraining costs, etc. So there are significant business reasons why you should be taking this topic seriously. So I might skip this just in the interests of time, but maybe have a think about this for yourself. If you were talking to your leadership team, which element of that business case is going to land most with them if you need support to influence and persuade them. So what can you do to create a supportive and menstrual health and menopause culture at work? Well, it's about being open and inclusive, recognizing it's not just women that perhaps feel the effects of what we've been talking about today. Probably everybody is impacted in some way. There's a lot of stigma and taboo around these topics. Go back 10 years ago and they just weren't being talked about at all. So we've still got a journey to go on, and it's good that so many people have signed up to sessions like this. So you can develop your support framework, thinking about your policy. If you don't have a policy, thinking about what what do you offer in terms of support and wellness programs? Train and support your people managers to be able to have those conversations, feel comfortable and confident having those conversations, and perhaps introduce peer support or champions, and even maybe coaching as well. So, these are all things that we do at the Thrive team. Awareness webinars, manager training, which is CPD accredited, and menopause coaching as well, which can be available to individuals and as groups as well. So I think any step you take has to start with awareness, and there's lots of free resources around as well, so to sort of recommend trawling through for those, but I will be sharing some things with you just at the end slide. But before that, I just want to share with you some of those top tips for supportive conversations, and these these lend themselves very well to conversations about menstrual health and menopause, but it's it's the same for any sort of sensitive or difficult subject, really. One, don't make assumptions. Allow colleagues to decide how much they want to share and lead the conversation. And perhaps linked into leading the conversation is, use the language that they use. I've got further down the slide, use appropriate language, but be led by the conversation the individual use. It's not about giving advice, but it is perhaps about giving options and support. It's about being non-judgmental, showing empathy, listening, being patient. People might find it very difficult to open up about topics that they probably feel are very, very personal, and probably feel, these aren't topics that are normally talked about in the workplace. I don't know how it's going to be it's going to land. Try not to be embarrassed. If you're embarrassed, they're probably going to be embarrassed too. Maybe share your vulnerability around that. You can signpost to trusted resources that are sort of within and outside your organization. And of course, it goes without saying, it's about respecting privacy and confidentiality. Wellness action plans, and it's going to be something that I'll share with you. They can provide a helpful framework for conversations. So if they're not something that you're already using, even if you're not using them formally, as in filling in a form, just the questions around them can be helpful guides for managers. So I said I was going to share with you some resources. If you scan there, you're going to get access to our menopause conversation tips, our wellbeing action plans for menopause, and wellbeing action plans for menstrual health. And Kim, I think you can I send you Thrive support offerings? I can do that. If you're happy to do that, Joe, well, we'll work out how we exchange details. The other thing I just want to sort of share with you before we leave is just how you can connect with me. And if you have a look at our website as well, you can sort of see a whole load of other information. I appreciate I'm slightly over time, and I appreciate it's lunchtime and you need to head off. So I'm going to say thank you very, very quickly for that. Thanks for your engagement today. And, if I can help with anything, then please do connect, get in touch. And but the slides and the copy of the recording will be available from Joe.
Thanks very much,
Thank
Ali.
you.
There was just a, I mean, we are okay for time anyway, but there was just a quick question. I don't know whether the lady's still on, from Jenny. Just says, I go to the managing attendance policy to support with the specific health symptoms. That then signposts to OH, reasonable adjustments. Do we need to go further? If so, what tangible things could we consider? I mean, I know you've
So,
covered quite a lot anyway.
yeah, so I think occupational health, great, and my experience in HR, whatever they advise, is important to sort of follow through. I think you can't go wrong by asking the individual themselves what else could we be doing, or what would help you. People know their own bodies. They know what would be helpful. Now, it might not always be reasonable what they're asking for, and it might not always be feasible, but asking the individual directly is important. And then I think if you've got all of that, if you've got access to other resources, like EAP, for example, often EAP websites have a whole host of other information around menopause and other types of health. Yeah, sorry, Joe, can you just repeat the question again?
Oh, sorry, yeah, I've just scrolled down. 1 minute.
Sorry.
That's okay. Um, do we, oh, that then signposts to OH and reasonable adjustments. Do we need to go further? If so, what tangible things could we consider?
Yeah. Well, again, I have a look at the wellness action plan that I've just shared as well. And if you follow through those questions and engage the individual in a conversation, and keep that under review, I think that that could be very, very helpful. Um, most people know themselves what might be helpful. Um, so I'd ask the question directly.
Okay, thank you. What I'll do, Ali, is I'll add your email address to the email that I'm going to send out this afternoon. So people got
Thank you.
anything specific, then they can come back to you.
Yeah, brilliant.
So thanks
Lovely.
very much to everyone. We will send out some correspondence to everyone that signed up for the event. I'll send that out this afternoon, and I'll put a post on LinkedIn. So if you'd like a copy of Ali's slides and the copy of the recording, then please put a comment against the LinkedIn post. Our next event is on Thursday, the 4th of December, so 2 weeks today, and it's called Performance Management. A link to sign up for this will be included in the email. If anyone's recruiting, we've also got FD Recruit, Exec Recruit, and Charity Recruit within the group. But otherwise, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to you, Ali, for your time and effort putting everything together, and to everyone for signing in. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone.